Welcome to Matters Financial and Geopolitical from the Frontier, and thank you as always for stopping by, and I hope you had a great weekend. It was of course Mother's Day, and I like this photograph of some roses from the New York Times, and I recalled my mum, of course, who passed away a few years ago. Macro Thoughts, Reminiscences of a Stock Market Operator. This is the book I keep on going on about by Edwin Lefevre, and actually the entire book is posted on the internet and the link is there if you ever fancy reading it. And just some quotes. That is how I first came to take an interest in the message of the tape. The tape was the movement of prices, the behavior, the patterns. It takes a man a long time to learn all the lessons of all his mistakes. They say there are two sides to everything, but there is only one side to the stock market, and it is not the bull side or the bear side, but the right side. It took me longer to get that general principle fixed firmly in my mind than it did most of the more technical phases of the game of stock speculation. I've heard of people who amuse themselves conducting imaginary operations in the stock market to prove with imaginary dollars how right they are. Sometimes these ghost gamblers make millions. It is very easy to be a plunger that way. It is like the old story of the man who was going to fight a duel the next day. His second asked him, "Are you a good shot?" "Well," said the duelist, "I can snap the stem of a wine glass in 20 paces." And he looked modest. "That's all very well," said the unimpressed second, "but can you snap the stem of the wine glass while the wine glass is pointing a loaded pistol straight at your heart?" With me, I must back my opinions with my money. And then one more quote from that book. "We ran into the big boom of 1901, and I made a great deal of money, that is, for a boy. You remember those times? The prosperity of the country was unprecedented. We not only ran into an era of industrial consolidations and combinations of capital that beat anything we had had up to that time, but the public went stock mad. In previous flush times, I've heard, Wall Street used to brag 250,000 share days, when securities of a par value of $25 million changed hands. But in 1901, we had a 3 million share day. Everybody was making money." And on that note, look at this photograph of Wall Street taken in 1958, all photographs Marvin E. Freeman, and another one of Wall Street from that same time. And a Bitcoin is now worth, according to markets, and you remember at the beginning of the year I said an optimal portfolio at this moment looks like one long Bitcoin, and long Bitcoin, short gold on the spread. We've never had it so good. Global equity is now worth $73.3 trillion, the highest value in history. Home Thoughts, footloose, never managed to get something like this before. Lucky, especially given the position of the other Ellie, Life on Earth, David Yarrow in the Ambercelli. I like this, the Great Rift Valley Curio Shop, Christine Hagengraf, and it's a very famous stopping point, I must say. And here's another photograph of the Great Rift Valley from Ninara on Flickr. And I like this, beetroot and bourbon, point two coffee at Dame du Pic Sauce, the Four Seasons Hotel, London. The best airplane bars have leather banquets, morning programming, according to Bloomberg Pursuits, and this is Virgin's bar on an aeroplane. I confirmed this new variant, number 2, had been deployed after malware tech blog registered the kill switch variant number 1, WannaCry. I just like the image that they posted with it. Quite a picture. This is Emmanuel Macron. And he clearly has a tailwind, but you know, France is a very complicated country to organize. And, you know, I remember from the time of Alain Juppé, when you tried to go against the unions, before long there was a string of tractors around Paris, and that was that. So it'll be interesting to watch how he proceeds from here. South Korea says North's claims on nuclear missile need analysis. KCNA, citing leader Kim Jong Un, accused the United States of browbeating countries that have no nukes and warned Washington not to misjudge the reality that its mainland in the North's sighting range for strike. Japan's Abe had phone calls with South Korea and the US on North Korea, but you know, I tend to think that for now it's a contained situation. China pledges $124 billion for the new Silk Road and is a champion of globalization. Ironic, isn't it? Pepe Escobar has written an interesting piece in Asia Times. Let's cut to the chase. China's new Silk Road initiative is the only large-scale multilateral development project that the 21st century has seen so far. The big ideas behind this grand Chinese plan, however, are still getting lost in translation. At first, this Trans-Asian Trade Expressway was billed as One Belt, One Road, OBOR, a literal translation from the Chinese Yi Dai Yi Lu. Now it's the Belt and Road Initiative, the BRI, but that still does not really fly in the West, even when China was tried adding a piece of soft power spin as in its attempts to sell the Belt and Road to English-speaking children. The Chinese are saying an interconnectivity initiative on a global scale could be as important as European Union. OBOR BRI would not work if it was merely a geopolitical gamble. As much as this will act as a boost to economies from Bangladesh to Egypt and Myanmar to Tajikistan, it is also a far-reaching economic free trade investment plan that will open up markets for Chinese technology and merchandise. All roads lead to Beijing. That's the key point to keep in mind. And it's very, very breathtaking in the scale of it. Europe's wall against African migrants is almost complete. A deal signed in Italy with tribes operating in southern Libya may be the last element of the barrier the EU has been constructing to exclude Africans from Europe. To seal the southern Libyan border means to seal the southern border of Europe, declared Italian Foreign Minister Marco Minetti, following the signing ceremony in early April. And clearly they put it all together. Libya is of pivotal importance as the primary point of departure for the central Mediterranean route. And in fact, President Gaddafi said as much. He said, the day you got rid of me, it'll be like a cork has been let out of the bottle. New York editorial, Trump this week. Ineptitude so surreal as to qualify as a kind of performance, art, or maybe slapstick. This is Michio Kakutani, New York Times. President Trump craves loyalty but offers none. Mr. Trump's actions and the disclosures by those close to him reveal the president to be insecure, fearful man who can't eat or place a phone call without a backdrop of fawning aides. Rather than cultivate experienced, strong-minded advisors who might challenge his views, Mr. Trump prefers to govern by impulse and edict, demanding absurd pledges of loyalty. Americans were also presented with a president obsessively watching cable television, used and attacking imagined enemies. On the day before he fired Mr. Comey, according to Time magazine, journalists who were in the White House with him, Mr. Trump surfed through recorded clips of Senate testimony about the Russia investigation, playing and replaying segments that he insisted backed up his false claim of Obama's wiretapping, as Vice President Pence and several aides stood by silently, scouring testimony by Sally Yates, the acting Attorney General he fired, and James Clapper, the former Director of National Intelligence. Mr. Trump gloated they were choking like dogs. Later, over a dinner, he got 2 scoops of ice cream to everyone else's 1. He marveled without irony at his critics' meanness. Chaos politics is Trump's calling card, but invariably Trump's distractions end up creating bigger and more enduring messes than the ones he's trying to flush down the memory hole. Spicer says it's offensive to say Trump is out of control. Trump is complaining about his cabinet members. They're insufficiently effusive in praising him. The Russian President Putin played the piano before meeting with President Xi Jinping on the sideline of the Belt and Road Forum in Beijing. President Kenyatta said we discussed a wide range of issues, including wildlife conservation, about which His Royal Highness is very keen. He was visiting the UK and then he was in China. Let's move on to the currency markets. Euro dollar, when I looked last one at 9.29, dollar index 99.15, below 99.50. Japanese yen, when I checked, 113.40, Swissy 100.12, the pound 129.20, Aussie 0.7420, India rupee 64.095, South Korean won 1124.61, the real 312.51, Egyptian pound 1805.35, and the rand 1327 now, but I can't see that holding for long. Dollar yen, let me put up a chart. It's been rejected at 115 severally, and therefore I think it could move to 112. Dollar index back below 99.50, key pivot. Euro dollar market is much more bullish about the euro now. We've been buying up the dips here. Keep an eye on it. It feels as if it could move higher. Gold firmed up after several sessions around the 1220 level. We're now at 1229.78. In its fight against shale, OPEC risks lower for longer oil production. That was Javier Blas. And oil prices surged this morning after Russia and Saudi Arabia backed output cuts for longer. The agreement needs to be extended as we will not reach the desired inventory level by the end of June. This is Saudi Arabia's Khalid al-Fali during the event with Russia's Alexander Novak. Therefore, we've come to the conclusion that ending will probably be better by the end of the first quarter 2018. Oil futures spiked as the ministers spoke. Have a look at this from Holger to get an idea. Interesting piece by Ian Bremer in Time, the 5 countries where change isn't coming for better or worse. Kenya, nearly a decade after post-election violence that killed hundreds and displaced hundreds of thousands, Kenya's become one of sub-Saharan Africa's better stories. President Kenyatta remains broadly popular, and while the country's fractured opposition once hoped he could put forward a single candidate to challenge Kenyatta, political egos got in the way. That's incorrect. Elections will be held on August 8. Kenyatta's path to re-election is clear, and the vote is likely to pass relatively peacefully. It's not just the political stability that spells good news for Kenya. Kenya's central bank is now helmed by the hyper-competent Patrick Njoroge, who continues to bring inflation under control. He will get a boost from the weather of all things, while drought conditions have caused food prices to spike. Angola, he's calling a managed transition. Rwanda, Kagame has been in power since 2000. This August he will win his 3rd 7-year term as president. There's not much suspense. But he says his hanging on will probably drive another violent transition before 2034. It's just very hard to predict when or how. Nigeria talking about virtually assures that the country won't undertake much needed economic and business reforms until February 2019 elections are over. Health of the 74-year-old President Buhari continues to deteriorate. South Africa, country hailed as the continent's success story just 5 years ago. It's a major fall from grace, and it is further left to fall, he says. Isabel dos Santos dismissed claims of her father's death. Harvard Business Review, the world's next great manufacturing center, talking about Africa in the early stages of a population boom that will reach 2 billion people by 2050, creating the largest pool of labor in the world. Ivory Coast, have a look at this tweet, the army mutiny, challenges as well with a low cocoa price. They've cut their budget. This is a considerable amount, $413 million. Ivory Coast is going through very, very difficult times. Mutinying soldiers sealed access to Ivory Coast's second setting. Congo opposition leader who died 3 months ago is still waiting to be buried. Obviously, Kabila doesn't want, that to sort of stir up people, the burial ceremony, etc. So he's been delaying tactics of raised speculation, but it fears Tshisekedi's funeral, were it to be held in the country, would further inflame opposition against Mr. Kabila. The Ministry of Health in the DR Congo notified WHO and partners of a lab-confirmed case of Ebola, saying now there are 3 cases. My piece over the weekend is Africa plays catch-up. Developed markets, stock markets have been on a roll for a few months now. The US Dow Jones is at a record, the Nasdaq is back at 1999 highs, and from Europe to Asia we are at records. The rally has been relentless, with the MB Emerging Markets Bond Index at its tightest spread for about 3 years. Emerging markets have come back into favor, with Narendra Modi's India leading the charge. The US is tightening, but the equity markets appear to be comfortable with the Federal Reserve's incremental and gradualist approach of 25 basis points a pop. Valuations are stretched on a PE basis, but what I've learned is that momentum is a powerful beast, and right now it continues to point higher. South African assets had also been on a roll until President Jacob Zuma decapitated Pravin Gordhan in his midnight strike, and the rand promptly reversed course. The rest of Africa badly lagged this global rally. Here in Nairobi, the oil share crashed 10.11% from the start of the year. Through March the 8th, the Nairobi NSE 20 slumped to 12.467% through January 30, when it closed at a multi-year low. Everyone I spoke to was ready to throw in the towel. Over on the west side, Nigeria's oil share was minus 8.53% through March 6th of this year. Ghana has been a standout, but overall, sub-Saharan African markets started the year seriously in the doldrums. Well, we've had quite a meaningful rebound of late. The Nairobi oil share is now plus 3.34% in 2017 and at a 6-month high. The NSE 20 is also at a 6-month high. The Nigerian oil share is plus 4.9% this year and at a 9-month high. Just came off an 11 consecutive session winning streak. There has been a significant mood change. These headline numbers, however, veil an even more extreme performance at the individual stock level. Sure, you can buy the indices, but you would have missed some simply alpha and exponential gains. Safaricom has rallied 26.9875 off its 2017 closing low. KCB is up 45.8% off its 2017 lows. Kenya Airways is plus 16.23% in 2017. Of course, you still have to exercise a strict stock-picking discipline, because there are some counters which increasingly look like they've entered a death spiral. Mumia Sugar is an example. Local institutions have been driving the rally in Nigeria, but here local institutions, with some exceptions, are massively underweight at the equity market. They have been snaffling up government bonds for a number of years now. Soon they'll have no option but to re-enter the equity market. Otherwise, their performance will be woeful in the comparison. So, I'm expecting momentum to build, of course, with an election in August and food inflation at 21% year on year. Caveat emptor still applies. South African all shares up 6.73% this year. Dollar versus rand. Take a look at this chart. I still think the rand's going to come under pressure. Barclays is mulling selling a further 16% stake in its Africa unit. Deconsolidating Africa will boost Barclays Common Equity Tier 1 ratio by at least 0.75 percentage points. Barclays Africa stock has slid 15% this year, the worst performer on the country's bank index. Nigerian all shares up 4.9% and has closed at an 8-month closing high. Fitch has decided on Friday to upgrade Ghana's sovereign rating to stable. Ghana Stock Exchange is up 12.47% this year. All aboard how Chinese money is transforming Africa. Interesting piece on CNN about the new railroad and how much it's going to handle. In the 10-year period between 2004 and 2014, African countries borrowed nearly $10 billion for railway projects from China, facilitated by Exim. So 2 Fridays ago, we set off with Safia Africa and Turn Up Travel for what will be the last train ride to Mombasa. I used to take that train when I was a young boy. Kenya's president urges rebalance of China-Africa trade. President Kenyatta has called on China to rebalance an increasingly skewed trade relationship between Africa and the rising superpower, arguing that Beijing must do more to tackle a widening trade deficit. Africa's trade balance with China has moved decisively into deficit due to a fall in the price of many African commodities such as oil, copper, iron ore, and cocoa. In 2015, the most recent year for which there's reliable data, Africa's 54 countries recorded a $34 billion deficit with China on total trade of $172 billion, according to the China-Africa Research Initiative at Johns Hopkins. In 2015, Kenya imported $5.9 billion worth of Chinese goods, most of it steel and equipment, for a $4 billion Chinese-built railway, but shipped only $99 million of goods in return. The president denied Kenya was taking on too much Chinese debt to finance what critics have suggested are white elephant projects. We believe strongly that infrastructural development is what's going to help us open up East Africa, open up the continent to trade and investment. He said that debt was still at a very sustainable level. On Mr. Kenyatta's watch, since 2013, debt has risen from 40% to 53% of GDP, and critics say that ratio is flattered by the fact that Kenya's GDP jumped by a quarter when it was recalculated in 2014. He also conceded that bank credit had slowed sharply since the introduction last August of a cap on interest rates, a measure he said it might eventually be reversed, as people have seen a decline in credit, especially to small and medium-sized enterprises. And maybe people should be willing to relook at this, he said. NASA, Pentagon, led by Raila Odinga. This was the big meeting, rallies they held over the weekend. Vodafone, now this is interesting, South Africa, said to buy $2.8 billion worth Safaricom stake from the government. Vodafone Group PLC South Africa agreed to buy a 35% shareholding in Safaricom Limited, giving the UK wireless operator majority control of Kenya's biggest company, according to 2 people familiar with the matter. That's a very big deal. The acquisition gives Newbury, England-based Vodafone control of 2 of Africa's biggest mobile phone companies. This is a big deal. Safaricom's share price details is all there on the website. It's up 5.744% this year. Nairobi all shares up 3.34%, has closed at a 6-month closing high. I wrote a piece about how Mr. Collymore deserved another term at Safaricom, and indeed he did. NSE 20 is up 1.84% in 2017 and at a 6-month high. The battle for Laikipia, you should take a look at this. This is an article by Daniel Knowles. It's really very good. Have a look at this photograph of Dusk Falls on the old Pajeta Wildlife Conservancy. I wrote about how, you've got to connect the dots, food prices, the weather, Laikipia. And here's a photo of Hannah in the waiting room in Lewa. I did an interview with William Roberts of Sirikoi. Have a look at that. Also, we did some footage of Sirikoi Lodge, which is a marvelous place to visit. Take a look at that as well. I interviewed Ian Craig, who's the prime mover behind the Lewa Wildlife Conservancy. Please take a look at that. Mumias's sugar share price fell to an all-time low. It's down 42.3%. And as I said, it's in a death spiral. KCB up 21.739% this year. Centum up 18.24% this year. Kenya Airways up 16.23% this year. And Sasini Tea and Coffee up 41.92% this year. Once again, thank you for stopping by.